Today we're talking about dropper posts. You ever notice how jockeys on racehorses are up hovering above the saddle while the horse is galloping away and they're just staying calm? That's what droppers allow us to do. They improve climbing, they improve descending, they improve cornering. They are so essential for me. But if you don't get enough drop, you're kind of missing out on what a bike could potentially do. Some bike designs make it trickier to run longer droppers in them. Now today I pulled out my Banshee Spitfire full suspension bike to further illustrate this point. This bike has a suspension pivot here that gets in the way of a dropper, and the seat tube ends right here. That means I'm limited into what droppers work well with this bike, and I can't run that 200mm dropper that I run on my Binary Maniac because there's suspension and stuff in the way. So today we're going to talk about how to get the most drop that I can in a bike like this that has some more restrictions regarding what posts I can run. A lot of people ask me in my videos, hey, can you fit a 170mm dropper on that? And the answer is, it depends. You could fit any dropper you want, but your seat might be this tall. And so does it fit? It depends on your leg length. It depends on which dropper you're using. And it depends on what can actually fit in the bike. So I can't answer that for you. A lot of companies post information about how much insertion they can get into their seat tube. Some companies don't. So what I've done is put my rigid posts in here and I set my saddle height for my max height saddle height. This is as high as I want it to be. It's the perfect length for when I'm at the 6 o'clock position. My leg is almost extended, but not quite. And that's where I want the top of my dropper to be. So I'm going to measure that from the center of the bottom bracket to the top of the saddle, 670mm. So that means whatever dropper I run at the max height and the max insertion, it's still got to be 670. If it's any higher than that, I can't run it. I'm going to make a little mark so I can see where my ideal insertion depth is. Now I'm also going to measure one more thing. I'm going to measure how far down we can put this dropper before it bottoms out. It bottoms out right here. This is my trusty dropper that I use on almost every build. It's a 9.8 fall line. This one's a fall line R, but it's the same dimensions as a fall line. So we're going to put it in and it will fit to that white mark. Here's an SDG Tellus. Now this has a big old actuator mechanism on the bottom that's definitely going to limit insertion. Also a 150mm dropper, but you can see that's about where we get on there. And here we have a 1-up 150mm dropper. Now you can see this little actuator mechanism. It actually clears the tube in here. So it actually sticks out in there just a little. It works with this pretty well. So we're going to measure that. All right, here we have all three of our seat posts. So the insertion depth should be the same on all of them, which is 212, 212. This is 212 to this cap. And because of the design of this bike, I can get away with that extra bit being in there. 212. Okay, so I've lined all three of these up with their insertion depth, and you can see the different heights between all of these. It's all over the place. So there's no way I'm going to be able to run this as a 150. So what we start to see is not all droppers are created equal, and we need to take measurements of the droppers as well when we're measuring this. If you hold these two up next to each other, they look very similar. However, the head is noticeably smaller on the 1-up. Let's throw them back in the frame and take a look at what that means. All right, let's measure our saddle height with these different 150mm droppers slammed all the way. This is our SDG post slammed all the way. 150mm dropper. This is 730. So this is my ideal saddle height here. So even though this is a 150mm dropper, that's an extra 60mm taller than what I need out of this. Another thing to consider is the stack height of your saddle. Some saddles are super tall and the rails come down a lot, which push the saddle up a bit. I'd love to see saddle manufacturers making saddles with lower saddle rails to get a lower stack height, so you might be able to get a little more drop out of it. I'd also love to see dropper makers putting these clamps lower down here to gain an extra 10 mil. I don't know why they're not doing that. a lot of these people aren't thinking about the way to get the most drop out of a dropper. So 730, way too tall. So a lot of that is this design here. This actuator mechanism prevents it from fitting in here all the way. So they're losing a good 25, 30 mil of drop compared to their competitors out of this. So that's a bummer. Let's try my 9.8 fall line R. This fits in a lot of frames and it's lower stack height than many. Let's find out. The head of the post is right here. They could insert it in there another 20 mil and get a ton more drop if they were willing to manufacture something that clamped the rails down here. And I don't know why they're not doing that, but somebody should. So let's see if my 150 mil fall line R is gonna fit in here. 690, it's 20 mil too high. And I could shim this down to be a 130 mil dropper. You definitely notice a difference between a 150 and a 130. And so that's unacceptable. For me, if I can't get a 150 mil drop in a frame, it's too scary for me to ride here in Sedona. So I need to get more drop. Let's see if the 1-Up does it. All right, here's the 1-Up 150 mil dropper with that same WTB Silverado saddle. Oh, 668. So I can actually raise this up 2 mil to get my 670 and get it perfect. That's a game changer for me. That allows me to run this frame. So I would love to see more companies focusing on low stack heights on their droppers. I still think we could, lower this so that when it comes down, it's actually sitting outside this flange. There's no reason the seat rails couldn't be down here when it's dropped. That would open up far more options. 150 is the least amount of drop I want. I'd love to fit a 170. There's no way on this with my leg height. I'm definitely not fitting a 200. So bravo to 1-Up for making such a low stack height dropper that will allow me to run longer droppers in frames I normally couldn't. I could probably run their longer droppers in more of my frames as well. So when you look right here, just at the insertion depth, these are within 2 mils of each other. And if you cut this off, then the 9.8 is actually the lower stack one. A little bit confusing, but depending on the frame, you can either get away with getting this, wiggle that in there and get it to work, or some frames it's not gonna work and it's gonna bottom out on the green part, not on the actual seat tube. In that case, the 9.8 is the same exact stack as the 1-Up. So this is why I say it depends. And so people always say, can I fit a 170? Can I fit a 180? I don't know. I don't know what your leg length is. I don't know what your ideal saddle height is. I don't know if you need it totally slammed. I don't know if you're running 1-Up droppers or 9.8 droppers or bike yoke or reverbs or whatever. So you really need to learn how to measure these things. And I'll do my best to kind of point out what fits and what doesn't when I do first looks at bikes. But without knowing this, I would have given up on the Spitfire as a possible bike for me because it doesn't allow me to run my normal 150s. But thankfully, 1-Up is thinking about keeping the stack as low as possible so I can get 150 mil drop where I don't have a whole lot of insertion in here. Anyway, I thought that was interesting enough to bring up because I get that question almost daily. And a lot of people don't realize the difference between other droppers. Now, I still love my fall lines. They're my favorite dropper. But what I would do to make them even better is I would have the seat rails attach maybe 20 mils lower, and then it'd be better in every way than the 1-Up. It'd have lower stack, it'd have lower insertion, it'd give me even more options. But, I'm not a designer of a company, I'm not a machinist. There's probably a good reason it is the way it is, but I can't help but wonder if a new forehead lowering those rails 20 mil would make this one of the best droppers on the planet. Anyway, I'm glad this exists. I'm glad 1-Up's thinking about that. I wish more dropper companies were thinking about that because that's a total game changer. These videos take a lot of time and energy to make, and the only way I can afford to keep doing more of these is because of my wonderful patrons. Thank you so much to all of my patrons who support this channel and make it possible. For as little as $5 a month, you can make a big difference supporting this channel. If you've learned a lot here and it saved you time and money and energy or revived your enthusiasm for mountain biking, consider becoming a patron today. Thanks for watching, everybody. There's a party in the mountains, and you're invited.